Everybody good? You can still see?
Yes, we're good.
Good. You'll get a lot more out of this if you can see. I love people are putting things in there. I was going to say there'll be a few more places where you can put in feedback on our sections as we go through those sections in the Miro board if you follow along with us. So I see there are ways to improve engagement in retros, how to conduct better retros, ideas, and how to be effective at retros. These are great. Keep adding ones there. I'll circle back to these and make sure that we see them and we get good conversation. I also see some stuff over in the chat. Oh, that's just everyone saying they can't see my screen. Here's our agenda for tonight or today, this morning, depending where you're joining from. We're going to spend a little bit of time in the intro. We'll do a retro overview, and then I'm going to talk you through 3 challenges. Now, these 3 challenges, I believe, if you get a grasp on them and you're able to overcome them regularly in your retrospectives, you will have more effective retrospectives than if you allow these 3 to sink your ship. I love the feedback I'm getting already here. These are great. And it's in line with feedback I've been collecting for a while. I've been thinking about retrospectives for a while, and this is in line with what some of the major problems people have with retrospectives. Scooting over to my right a bit more, and you're welcome to come and join me. This is a graph that says, where are you? My retrospectives are always amazing. They're good, sometimes stale, they're in a rut, or I don't have retrospectives. If you're in the Miro board, you can grab one of these dots and drag it over and just put it wherever you are, right? Wherever your spectrum is, just drag it over, put it there. That's just a snapshot. And my hope is we'll take another snapshot at the end and see if hopefully you feel a little more positive about that. Quick little bit about me. You already heard my introduction. This is kind of my journey, my learning journey. And I'll just tell you this, it's not over. I'm still learning every day. And I hope that you are too. That's why you're here, I hope, because as an Agilist, we always keep growing. One thing about me, just to put something interesting out there, I'm a huge fan of Irish tea. I spent a bit of time living in Ireland. I don't think they're with us because it's about midnight that time, but I love Irish tea. So that's what I'm drinking as we go through our talk here tonight. It is my favorite beverage of choice. All right, so we're going to move forward into our first section. I'm going to scroll over. You're welcome to scroll over with me. And I'm going to reveal a retro overview. So a retro overview, there's a few elements I want to talk about retrospectives. There is a green box on the far right that is a feedback box. As I'm talking, if you want to throw something out there to say, hey, oh my, things are moving. Thanks, Clement. If you want to throw comments out there to the right where it says feedback, you're welcome to do that as I'm going through this, okay? So retrospectives, let me unlock this real quick. My thing is moving. There we go. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Unclick here. There we go. Move that down. All right. An effective retrospective. What is an effective retrospective? For me, my definition, and you're going to hear different definitions from different people, but my definition of an effective retrospective is one where you have good team conversation with the purpose of coming out with 1 to 3 experiments to improve on that team's performance. So let's break this down a little bit. First of all, if you're having a retrospective, which you should be, and hopefully that's why you're here, you got to make sure you've got the right people. So who are the right people to have in a retrospective? My encouragement to you would be the people who are doing the work. So if you've got a team or a group or an org or a bunch of friends, if they're working on something and they want to get better over time, you want to make sure you get those people in the retrospective. Who do you want to not have in the retrospective? I would say onlookers, people who don't have a vested interest in the day-to-day performance, managers, people at a high level. And I know many of you are like, well, I have to have my manager in the retrospective. Maybe if that's your organizational requirement, you have to. But I'm telling you, if you want to get the most value out of a retro, bring in the people who have skin in the game, the ones who are actually doing the work. That's the right people. That's who you want to be working to improve the practice of the team over time. So you want to get the right people in the room. Also, you want to have the right amount of time. So how long are you looking backwards? If you're looking backwards 6 months, you probably need more than 30 minutes to talk through that. There's probably going to be more to unpack. Now, what I always like to do is try to see if I can get an hour and a half, or at the most 2 hours, because most of the teams I work with work on 2-week or 1 month iterations. So every 2 weeks or every month we're talking. And so I look for anywhere between an hour to 2 hours. The nice thing about having more time than what you need is that you can always end a retro early. If you go through all your planned activities, you've got your experiment, you've had good conversation about how to move forward, You can end early. That's great. The common input I hear from teams is they don't have enough time, that they're always pressed, that they have to rush at the very end and they don't get their action items well documented. So I would say look for maybe more than enough time and then scale back. Now, again, your organization may mandate you have this much time and that's all you're allowed. You got to do the best you can with what you have. But I'm telling you, start with the right people and try to start your best with the right time for 2 weeks. If you're doing Scrum, if you're doing a 2-week iteration, you really want to have an hour, ideally an hour and a half, but find the right time that works for your team. You want to have the right purpose. Make sure the team knows why they're there. A lot of times we're doing a retro. Why? Because we have to. Okay, what does that mean to me? So make sure they understand the purpose of the retro. The retro is for the team. If it's well explained, the team should actually be really excited about having a retrospective because it's their opportunity to inspect and adapt their processes. So make sure you make the right purpose clear and then the right activities. I'll talk a bit more about activities in a second, but it's important that as you're building the plan, you provide the team with the right framework through which to go through the retrospective. So if you went in and you said, what are we gonna do today? We're gonna talk about stuff to do better. Okay, what do? Talk about stuff to do better. That's not a good activity for a retrospective. You wanna come in and have a nicely laid out plan with activities for each phase of the retro. I'll get into that a little bit more here in the future. You wanna have the right flow. I can't tell you how many times I, as the Scrum Master, Agile coach, have planned a retrospective and I had it planned beautifully. I tell you, my plan was flawless. And about 30 minutes in, the team hit something that they didn't expect to hit. There was a nugget of inspiration or a challenge or something surfaced that no one was expecting. And I had to adapt the flow of the meeting to match what the team was uncovering. So even if you prepare the perfect retrospective and you have the perfect plan, always make sure that as a facilitator, you're facilitating the flow. And sometimes that flow can take you in unexpected places and you can find learning where you didn't expect to find anything. So be willing to flow with your retrospectives. And then you're looking for the right outcome. And what does that mean? Look back at my definition of an effective retrospective. You want to have some experiments to improve. If you get together with your group in a retro and you talk about really good stuff and then you leave, then you haven't started to change anything. You just had a really great conversation. And great conversation is good. We need more good conversations in our organizations, but you want to make sure you're having a conversation with a purpose to have effective outcomes. And those effective outcomes are 1 to 3 experiments to improve the team's processes. Don't do 50, don't do 10, don't do 5. Start small and lead from there, but start small. Make sure the team has the practice of finishing things, and then you can add more as you grow and you mature as a team. And then lastly, the right value. If someone asks you, what's the value you get out of a retrospective? If your boss asked you, you're having this retrospective, I'm spending an hour, hour and a half for this team to meet, why does it matter? Make sure you're clear and the team is clear on the value retrospectives provide. And what is that value? It's the value of a better future. See, if we're okay with our processes and we just lock it in and go, and no one's looking for areas to improve, what are we going to get? The same results we get today. And maybe that's okay for you today, but our world is changing rapidly. Competition is heating up. More and more entrants are coming into our markets and challenging us. Every organization, every team, every group needs to be thinking, how do we get better? And one of the most powerful ways to get better is to enable your teams, your frontline people, the work doers, to step back, examine their work, and make an experiment to try to improve it. If you read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey, he mentions in habit 7, sharpen the saw. We have to take time away from cutting down the forest to sharpen our saw so that we can accomplish more of what we want to accomplish and not get dulled down and become less and less and less effective. All right. So that being said, I have 3 sticky notes here that for me, in my conversation with Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, other people who lead retrospectives, these are the common challenges that I hear come up over and over again. And I saw a few of them even in our first section where people put in their challenges. And they are participation. How do I get people to participate? There's nothing new. Our team is stuck in a rut. We are doing the same thing over and over and over and over. So nothing new. And then lastly, nothing is actually changing. We meet, we retrospect, but nothing changes. So we're going to look at these three. We're going to break them down into pieces, and we're going to discuss how we can benefit in each one of these areas. Keep in mind the goal is this picture right here, an effective retrospective. You have good team conversation, 1 to 3 experiments to improve. So that's where we're headed on our journey. We're going to try to eliminate these 3 red ones. And along the way, I hope I can give you some tools, tips, and tricks to help you make your retrospectives as effective as they can be. Now, I'll stop for just a second and say, I obviously can't cover everything that I would love to cover in this section. I also have a ton of resources. I have lists of retrospective resources. I have a whole YouTube video playlist that I've gathered over time, and I'm happy to share with you, but I can't just copy and paste it somewhere. It's a journey. All of us are growing and finding more resources, getting better at our craft, practicing, improving, gathering as a community, and sharing. So I want to make this offer to you. If you get stuck somewhere along the way, I'm going to share these ideas and these resources with you. But if you get stuck somewhere along the way and say, man, what do I do next? I've tried this, I've tried that, but I feel stuck. Always feel free. I want you to reach out to me on LinkedIn or connect somehow, and I will do my best to help as many people as I can. I believe in the concept of retrospectives in the community, and I want to empower you to be as effective as possible. All right, let's jump into challenge number 1. I'm going to scroll down here to challenge number 1. And challenge number 1 is probably the most often cited challenge that I get inside of asking people about retrospectives. And it is participation. So often people say, I don't have good participation. And that exhibits itself by no one talks. We have a retro and I can't get anyone to say anything. Or maybe people aren't engaged. They sit there and they just stare at me. And I ask them, can we play a game? And they just sit there and stare at me. So they're disengaged. I can't get people to open up. They say surface level things. They won't go deeper and help me uncover really powerful change opportunities because they're just staying up here on the surface. Or worse, people don't even show up. I have a retro and I don't get the whole team there. That's a problem. And then the last one down here, it's a little small, but it's distractions in the room. You know, maybe they bring in their laptop or their phones because they have urgent work they have to do, but they'll be there for your retrospective. All these things are signs of low participation. So before we talk about solutions or maybe some ideas to how to combat this, I want to encourage you with, why do these things happen? And the top why you've probably heard a little bit about, and honestly, this could be a webinar of its own or even a 3-hour training: psychological safety, the opposite of fear. A lot of times, unbeknownst to us, we're having meetings, we're in a business setting, we fail to recognize the power dynamics that are in play, both on the team and in the org at large. A lot of our team members, or maybe even you yourself, don't feel safe to open up and say what they really think. Now, I'm not saying bashing on somebody or saying bad stuff about the other team. What I'm saying is, what do they really think could improve? What is their real suggestion for how they might get better themselves? Imagine this scenario. I'm a brand new employee, or maybe I'm a tenured employee, and I know that people are getting laid off. And so I don't want to get laid off. And someone says, do you have any ideas for improvement? Well, I know my idea for improvement is actually that I should do some training so I can get better. If I'm worried about getting laid off or whatever else might be concerning me about my safety on the team, I might say, I don't have any ideas. I'm good. I might actually be silent rather than speak up if I don't feel safe. There's some amazing experiments. There's one in particular, I forget the name of it, but it's on YouTube. They did a study where they had people in a room answering a question down a line. Which of these lines is the longest? And each person would answer line A, line A, line A. All of them were actors except for the actual test subject, who didn't know he was the test subject, and the rest were actors. The whole room said the wrong thing, and to conform with them, people knowingly gave the wrong answer. They knowingly went with the group over what they knew to be true. If you don't have psychological safety on your team, that same thing is going to happen. If 9 out of 10 people on your team say everything's great, and the 10th person feels there's something that can be fixed, they'll more than likely go along with the group to not cause waves and say, yep, everything's fine, just like everyone else said. We've got to create that psychological safety. Talk a little bit about how to do that in a second. Other reasons why people don't speak up or engage, they don't feel valued. They don't feel like anyone cares if they have anything to say. Or maybe if they said something, it might not make a difference or change anything. So you got to make sure people feel valued, not only as a person, as a human, but also as someone who contributes. You've got to value those contributions. This next one is really hard. They don't believe anything will change. Sometimes we have let our ability to adapt atrophy in our organizations, and teams can reflect that. Nothing's ever going to change. Why are we even having this retrospective? So maybe they feel stuck and like they're not going to see any difference if they engage in the retro. This one is interesting. People are naturally more shy sometimes than others. And so you've got the people in the room who are comfortable and who can talk. And then you got the people in the room who would rather not talk because they don't want to put themselves out there. They're just naturally more of an introverted kind of person. That's okay. But if you really want to get the full value of a retrospective, you want to make sure you're including those shy people. And then one last reason why is tied into the naturally shy. If you've ever seen this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The loudest voice in the room. One person or maybe two, the tech lead, the manager who's not really supposed to be there, the person who's been at the company the longest dominates the conversation. I'll tell you what we need to do. And 45 minutes later, they finish their monologue. So all of these are reasons why people don't participate. You may have more, and I'd love to discuss those in the Q&A if you have other reasons maybe why or things we can address. Let me address a few of these. I'm going to scroll down here. First of all, what do you need to do? We're going to start at the left. What do you need to do to make an effective retro when people aren't participating? You need to, first of all, listen and observe. I have an idea for you that might be a little bit out there, but trust me, it's powerful in your ability to influence a team. When people don't speak, they're actually telling you something. When someone doesn't give feedback, they're actually giving you feedback. It's our job as coaches, facilitators, people leading retros to see if we can read between the lines and understand why. If someone refuses to come to a retrospective, that refusal is giving you good information. They don't find it valuable. Someone told them they better do their work or else, or maybe they just don't like you, but they're giving you information. And so you need to make sure to learn from the things that aren't said as well as the things that are said. So the first thing we want to do is we want to listen and observe our teams. What do you see? What do you hear? Yes, that's on the surface, but then go a little bit deeper. Why are maybe some of those interactions happening? If you really pay attention and you really listen to a retrospective, you can see safety in work in the retrospective. You can see people visibly open up and talk confidently to the room as if everyone believes what they say. And then you can see the people get very quiet and very closed who say, no, nothing to report. Or you can see that look across the table where someone looks over to make sure they're doing okay and someone's not going to chew them out. Yeah, everything's fine. Or no, I think we should only fix that. Look for those things. You can start to see them as you read the room. It's obviously harder inside of Zoom in a virtual environment, but if you can get cameras on and microphones on, you can see some of those subtle nuances, those body language cues. You can see those if you're able to interact with video. If not, it gets a little bit harder. But you want to listen and observe. You want to do everything you can do to create a safe space. Read the retrospective prime directive at the beginning of a retro if you feel like safety is a problem. Do a safety check. Ask everyone to anonymously report how safe they feel so you can show the team, look, we have several team members who don't feel as safe, like they can speak up and say what they want. It's your job to create that environment, if you're leading a retro, where people can feel safe to comment, safe to disagree, safe to add their voice to the conversation. That's a whole nother topic. But if you can create a safe space for the team, you will see more effective retrospectives. One of the key ways to do that is expect and demand respect in your retrospectives. Tell the team, we're here as a team. We're here to get better. but we're going to respect one another. I have down here from scrum.org, the Scrum values, right? This is a great image to share with your team. Identify respect as one of the key values your team is going to exhibit, especially in your retrospectives. If someone else is talking, you're not going to cut them off. No, that's not a problem. We are going to respect each other. And then you as a facilitator, if you see disrespect, remind people on the team, step in and say, hold on, let's hear what they have to say. We are going to respect their opinion. Even if we disagree with it, we can discuss that later, but we want to respect that each person has a right to share what they feel like are opportunities to improve. So make sure you establish respect as key in your retrospectives. And then you want to show progress. If a team feels like they get together every 2 weeks and talks about how to improve and nothing changes, they're going to disengage very quickly. You need to make sure that every retrospective, you're picking something as an experiment the team can influence. And then you want to report back on the progress of that experiment. You want to make sure to bring back stories. Hey, team, this last iteration, we all agreed to do this experiment. What happened? Did it work? Do we need to change? Talk through those things. You want to think big with a team, but start small and make sure you're learning fast. And this last one, you want to facilitate to participation. Don't just facilitate by saying, whatever you guys want to talk about, let's talk about it. You want to intentionally lead them into participation as you facilitate. Ways to do that: understand the 5 phases of a retrospective. This is a link. You can also Google it. Look into maybe liberating structures. It's a great tool for ways to engage a team with some open space ideas. Take a coaching stance and maybe do a one-on-one with participants who aren't participating. If they're not participating in the retros, maybe you need to do a coaching opportunity with them and say, hey, help me understand what's holding you back in our retros. I really feel like you have some good ideas, but I don't ever hear them. And then look into invitation and especially the concepts of open space. These are some links over here to the right. You can also Google that. 5 phases, liberating structures, the coaching stance, and open space. Those are all ideas that can help you participate or facilitate to participation with the people inside of your retrospectives. All right, if you've got questions, you can drop them in the chat, drop them in the feedback. We'll come back to them. I'm going to move through these next 2 so we can get into our Q&A time. So challenge number 2, there's nothing new. We are stuck in a rut. What does that look like? It looks like you're asking the same 3 questions every retrospective. Does this sound familiar? What did we do well last time? What did we not do well that we can improve on? And is there anything holding us back? Does that sound like a daily stand-up to you? Or you've got the classic 4 L's, right? What did you like? What did you love? What did you learn? Or maybe you've got the mad, sad, glad. Every retrospective. What makes you mad? What makes you sad? What makes you glad? That gets old after a while. It becomes monotonous, and retrospectives lose that flavor that they often have. That can lead to people feeling like a retro is boring. Listen, if you feel like people are disengaged or you're losing your flow, ask the team, hey team, retrospectives, would you consider them boring? Or do you consider them exciting and lively and you never know what's going to happen? If you're brave, you can ask your team that and see what they think. Sometimes you say we're in a rut because we're not getting any ideas for improvement. I had a team one time, every retro. I mean, we're doing the best we can. The business has problems, but we're good. So how do you move a team from there into creative experiments for improvement? And the last one is no fresh thinking. And what I mean when I say fresh thinking is you keep hearing the same things over and over again. So they maybe bring up the same challenges, but nothing's really changing, nothing really new. We're all still the victim of that terrible policy. We all still have to do these things we don't like doing. Woe is us. That's a bad place to be, stuck in the nothing new rut. So how do you get out of that? Recognize variety is the spice of life, and you've got to spark something different. Now, this is my favorite and maybe most mischievous idea when I'm coaching people. And they say, look, everything's just the same. We're just, doing the same thing over and over and again. I say to them, that's your opportunity to really mix things up. When the team comes in, they should be surprised in your retros. Whoa, what are we doing? That's new. Listen, I know generally in business, we don't get surprised a lot, right? We have our plan, we have our goals, we have our annual performance objectives, we have our KPIs, and we make a plan and we do our plans. Use your retrospective as a chance to surprise your team, engage them, throw something at them off the wall. Delight them with a new opportunity to engage in activity that normally during business, right? We have business meetings and business meetings perform according to schedule. Find a way to delight them. One of the ways you can do that, have fresh activities. There are so many places online, books you can read that you can find activities. One of the best ways I found is talk to other Scrum Masters or Agile coaches or people who lead retros and say, what are you doing for your retros? If they just say, mad, sad, glad every time, find someone else. There's people out there who are doing different things. Go find some of those things and try them with your team. Try it and find what works. I know sometimes when you're reading an activity about retrospectives, I know I felt this way, it can feel like, but if I try that and no one answers, it's going to bomb. And I don't want to have a terrible activity where no one talks. It's okay. I've had that happen to me before. I had a game. I was like, let's play this game. And I threw it out there and I was excited and the team went, meh. What do? You go, cool. Well, that game was fun. Next thing. And you move on and you don't let it ruin your retrospective. It's okay for you as a person leading a retro to try something new. Maybe it works. Hopefully it does. Maybe sometimes it doesn't resonate. If you feel like something's not resonating with the people, pack it up and move on. Don't feel stuck to press through something that the team is clearly not engaging with and not enjoying. And then I like this right here. Have a different perspective. And what do I mean by perspective? If you think about it, our teams most of the time spend their days looking at things a certain way. If they're a developer, they look at things the way a developer looks at things. If they're a tester, they look at things the way a tester does. If they're a volunteer raising money, they look at things the way a volunteer raising money looks at things. They all look at things through a certain perspective. It's our opportunity in the retrospective to shift that lens, to have them look at a common problem in an uncommon type of way. So how do you maybe change that perspective with your team? Couple of ideas for you here. Number one, what if you tried different roles? What if you asked one person on the team, let's say a developer, to wear the hat of a tester? I want you to conduct this retrospective, be a part of the retrospective like a tester would be, raise a tester's concerns, and then have the testers act like developers or vice versa. But you can have people mix up their roles and have them practice being in someone else's seat. Literally, you can have them switch seats, have them practice being in someone else's seat and speaking on their behalf. You're getting them to think about their problems with a different set of lenses. You can also change up your format, right? So normally I recommend teams follow the 5 phases of a retrospective. It's a nice curve, but maybe one time you totally throw them off. You totally say, we're going to spend this much time we're going to play a game for the first 15 minutes, and then we're going to do something else. Or maybe you say, we are going to watch this YouTube video for the first few minutes. But by shifting the way the meeting flows, people don't come in like zombies with their phones in front of them. Oh, no, you're going to be doing the icebreaker first. I never liked the icebreaker. I'm just going to be on my phone. Mix it up on them. Don't let them, if it gets stale, don't let them think, I know what's going to happen. You're predictable. Oh, no. Let's not be predictable. Another one is different location. This is obviously nice when you're in a conference room. Move to a different conference room. Move to another part of the building. Do it outside. Whoa, that could change things. But we're often on Zoom. What do? You ask everyone to go get a different background. Hey, everyone, today we're going to do our retro at the beach. Everybody get a beach background. Hey, today we're doing a retrospective in the sewer. Everyone go get a sewer background for Zoom. And move the virtual location of your retrospective. Again, changing perspectives. Let's use the sewer retrospective. Imagine you have everyone change their picture to a sewer and you say, team, there's problems with our team, but instead of trying to solve them at the team level, we're going to look at them from down in the sewer, look up and see if we can solve what's leaking from our team or where's our challenges. Change that perspective with them and they'll see things differently. Let me give you a coaching example. I was in coaches training and we were in a large hall and they said, here's what we want you to do. Coach your person and say, what's your problem? What are some solutions you see based on where we are? And so I remember when I got coached, I was in a coffee shop first and I went, well, this coffee shop reminds me of my team. They're delivering like the people behind the counter. They have to deliver when they get paid. And then after 10 minutes, we moved to another portion of that room. And over there was some art. And so we moved over by the art and they said, tell me about your problems that you're facing here by this art. And I said, well, this art reminds me, that we have these things that we look at, these artifacts, and we And just by changing where I was in the room, it changed the way I was thinking about my problems. So try changing your locations. I love this phrase, change your proximity to change your perspective. You know, I got this one time, I was on the highway and I was right behind an 18-wheeler. You can't see very much when you're right behind an 18-wheeler. And then I slowed down and I was further away. I could see a lot. And then I sped up and I got right behind him again and I could see less. Do the same with your team. Zoom in down to the granular level and then tell them, okay, team, we're going to zoom out. Now from the 50,000 foot level, what do we see? And then we're going to zoom back in. Change your proximity to your challenges and enable your team to see things with a fresh set of eyes. So changing your perspective changes your experience. 2 ideas here. If you say, man, I need some more ideas for my retrospectives, I'm just stuck. If you haven't heard of RetroMat, go check it out, retromat.org. It automatically will generate for you retrospective ideas. Take those and modify them for your needs, but it's a great place to go for ideas. Also, Fun Retrospectives, another great resource, funretrospectives.com. Both are free and both have really good content that you can use to spice up your retrospectives. All right, I'm on the home stretch now. We're almost moving into Q&A. I'll take 10 minutes on this last one and we'll move into Q&A. Nothing actually changes. This gets disheartening. You feel like the man pulling his hair out. We have retrospective after retrospective after retrospective, but nothing seems to change. What are some of the symptoms? No action items. We talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but then we don't make up action items coming out of the retrospective. That's got to be fixed. No follow through. We have action items. There's 10 of them right there, but nothing ever gets done on those action items. How do we get them to follow through with them? Or no improvement. We try things, but we never get any better. It just stays the same. Nothing improves. It's this no change down here. If you're not seeing changes in your team and you're having regular retrospectives, there's a disconnect that needs to be fixed. Because retrospectives, remember, good conversation by the team, that itself can generate improvements in the team performance, but then 1 to 3 experiments to improve the team. Now, maybe you have a stretch of experiments that don't work, but eventually you're going to have one that works really well if you've got the whole team involved in it. So if you're having a string of nothing is getting better, I would say it's broken. And to have an effective retrospective, we need to zoom in and try to fix a few of those elements. So the first thing I'm going to recommend to you, invitation. And what I mean by that is invite the team into the process of improvement. Often in business or in large organizations, we're all told what to do. You will do this, you will do that, you will do this. And we simply follow. Okay, you said to do it, I'm going to do it. You said I have to be in here for an hour, I'm going to be in here for an hour. When you invite people, I want to invite you to be a part of the conversation. I want to invite you to help make this team better. I want to invite you to help solve this problem. What that leads to is if the people take the invitation, that leads to engagement. They are engaged because they've been invited. They're there because they want to be there. They have opted in to the discussion and the improvement. That leads to buy-in. If we were having a retro and you came up with an idea I disagreed with, and we said, we'll try it. I don't care. Why am I involved? But if I'm there and I'm a part of the conversation and I'm engaged and I helped you co-create that idea, I have some personal interest in it coming to fruition, some personal interest in seeing it succeed. Buy-in leads to action, and action should lead to change over time. So you want to be looking for these things. If you're saying, I don't see any change, nothing's changing, are you seeing action? If you're not seeing action, ask yourself, am I seeing buy-in? If you're not seeing buy-in, ask yourself, am I seeing engagement? And then ask yourself, if I'm not seeing engagement, where is this coming from? I like this image because sometimes this is our reality. The team member feels like everyone's telling them what to do. Well, if you don't really have a choice in the matter, it gets better, it doesn't get better, it's not really your fault, right? If a leader's idea fails, so if a leader says, hey, you're going to do 10 story points instead of 5 this sprint. If it fails, what's the problem? The leader was wrong. The leader made a mistake. The leader had a failure. Yeah, failure's okay. For the leader, he'll brush it off and be fine. She'll brush it off and be fine. But what if it's your idea? What if it's your plan for improvement? What if it's your pet project that you really think could make a difference, but if you try it and it fails, what are the consequences? Hopefully there's not very many. Hopefully you're in a learning organization that encourages failure. Why failure? I'm not saying fail because failure is great. I mean, fail as in we tried an experiment and either we got a positive or a negative result. It either worked or it didn't. But the point is we learned something. And so what I'm saying here is the action items should come from the team. They should be generating them because then they'll have buy-in to make them happen. If they have buy-in to make them happen, you're going to get good feedback from those experiments, better than if you just told them what to do. As a facilitator, you should never come into a retrospective and say, I know what you need to work on. I saw it this last sprint. If you just go do this, you'll be better. Bye, everyone. Good retro. I don't think you'll see very much improvement from that unless you have everyone on the team just being a compliant person because they're really nice and they're afraid of you, right? You want to include the team in the discussion and let their ideas go forward. Now, do you let them have ideas that are absolutely outside of the scope of the team? No, no, no. As the facilitator, your job is to keep them in the proper scope. Let's talk about problems that we can solve. Let's talk about problems that we can improve. Let's talk about problems we can actually influence, right? If your team is led to talk about things they can influence, then they'll have that opportunity to build that buy-in and make sure that failure is an option for them. If they're going to get punished because they tried an idea and it didn't work, you're not going to have effective retrospectives at all. One thing I'll tell you about your ideas, action items, passion projects, whatever the other comes out of the retro, make it visible. Don't let the team lose sight of the ideas that they had during the retrospective. Keep them in front of them, keep them visible so the team knows it matters. Visibility matters because it shows the actions matter. If you say, we're going to try this experiment, and then you never talk about it again, the team's going to go, these experiments don't really matter. But if you bring it up, if you ask one of the team members to own it and, hey, bring this up at least 3 times in the next sprint so we can remember we said we were going to try this experiment. If it's visible, if you bring it up at the next retrospective, then the team will know that it actually matters and it's something that's worth their time and their effort. And the last and most insidious thing that keeps a team from having effective change out of their retrospectives is overwhelm. I'm not going to play these two, but I've got 2 YouTube video clips here. One is the I Love Lucy. You can just Google I Love Lucy chocolate and you'll find this video. It's all about being overwhelmed with work. And then the resource utilization trap by Crisp Academy also is about being overwhelmed by work. And what's the problem with being overwhelmed? You have great intentions. I know how to improve. We had a great retro. I've got 3 action items. I'm ready to go. And then someone comes to your desk the next morning and says, I've got a lot more work for you to do. You have to do all these things. And the improvement falls away. If you want an entire frame for looking at ways to improve in the middle of what's commonly called the whirlwind, The 4 Disciplines of Execution is a great book. It's the 4 Disciplines of Execution. The whole book is about how do you move forward big ideas in the middle of the daily whirlwind that often distracts us from improvement. All right, I've covered a lot of ground there. I hope you found something that resonated with you. If you're still on the Miro board up here in the session feedback, I would love to get some what you loved, what you learned. You can put another dot with where you're at in your retrospectives, any other feedback and questions or any answered questions. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's move into Q&A because I want to help you where you're at and some of the challenges you may be having if I didn't address them with this presentation earlier. So I'm going to stop there. All right. And catch up on the chat. Excellent. All right. Should I just take some of these questions from the chat? Is that what you'd like me to do? Oh, might be muted.
Yep, I just realized that. Sorry.
Oh,
Yep,
no problem.
go right ahead with do have one from Christina that what if we truly have psychological safety and it shows, but new people on the team aren't used to this environment, so they are cautious and scared to ask questions or to be transparent that they don't know something, so they can gladly teach them. Sometimes telling them doesn't work, and showing them through our actions is hard and tends to take a long time when
Yeah.
we are all remote in a shared environment each day. Then she has
Yep.
a little arrow. Is it good and yet bad to have a problem? Switching roles
Yep.
may help with this. Thanks. Is
Yep.
everything that she added on that.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that's great. And yeah, so if you've got psychological safety with a portion of your team, congratulations. That's worth celebrating. That's wonderful. What you want to do is integrate people into it. And here's what I'd recommend. Talk to the members of your team who are already there and say, hey, team, we have some new people coming in. You guys are comfortable. What are some ways we can make them comfortable? Add that as a retrospective topic and let the people who are already safe establish that safety norm. Because it's one thing if it's your job, you're the retrospective leader to establish safety. But if the team owns, yeah, you know, if I went to them and said, hey, you know, we'd love for you to speak up, or maybe we could do this activity to build that psychological safety. If you can get the team owning, having a shared sense of psychological safety, you won't be on your own. And that person will realize everyone's not just feeling safe because you said so, they're feeling safe because the whole team is doing it. So if I had a team where half was safe and maybe a couple more people were coming in that were brand new and were kind of skittish, I would really ask my team, hey team, what are some ideas that we can do as a team, a whole team, to really make sure we all feel comfortable in this environment? Now, if you've got a whole team, or maybe the overwhelming percentage of your team is new, and they feel unsafe. So let's say 8 people are skittish and 2 people feel safe, then you really need to just do whole team things. And so I see a question there. What are some things you do for psychological safety? And I think that really what you've got to do is you have to establish a sense of trust. You can't mandate trust, not in one another, not in you, not in the organization. So what I find the best path that I've experienced is let people be human together. Humanize each other, especially when you're virtual and remote. When you see someone in a little box, let people tell stories of their family, or let people share, hey, pick one thing off your desk and tell us, why is that thing on your desk and what does that mean to you? Ask people to pick an imaginary pet or a real pet and talk about why they love that pet. Let people be a little goofy with each other. When people are real and are humans, we naturally tend to trust them more. When you see someone like on TV, which is kind of what Zoom is, we see people on TV, we tend to think of them as not really real or acting. But once you get to know someone, oh, they have a kid at 6 years old. I have a kid that's 6 years old. We have that in common. You're creating bonds of trust that can strengthen the entire team. So that would be the number one thing I'd recommend. If you're struggling with psychological safety, find a way to make the team have human interaction and experiences, because that should naturally build up their ability to trust one another as they continue on their journey. Oh, good. I see more questions. Do you just want me to pick one of these off the chat maybe and just answer one of those?
You could just go right down. Brad was the next one. It was after the psychological safety. Feel free just to go right through them if you like.
Yeah, I'll just highlight them and I'll just move down them. All right. So how is a retrospective different from lessons learned? So great question. I think they do get confused a lot. And there's also the idea of like a post-mortem. We finished a project. Let's look back and see what happened and what do we do? And I would say this, I would say the concept of a retrospective is really looking at the team and the processes for how they're going to go forward as a team. Whereas when I think of a lesson learned, I think of a project or a piece of work. And normally where my brain goes when I hear lesson learned is, what can we do better about that work? Not necessarily what can we do better as a team in our internal processes and how we work. So what I want to see in my retrospectives is I want to see the team examining the team so that we grow better as a team. And then in things like sprint planning or in other meetings, I want to see the team focusing on the work. But in retro, I really want it to be focused on us as people working together as the most effective team we can be. So I would see it different from a lessons learned, in that the focus is more on the team and their interactions than the work the team does and how they accomplish this practice or accomplish that practice. Now, that line is very blurry. It is not as clear cut as what I just said. So I wouldn't stress too much about it. There's benefit in both of those. The idea is to look for good conversation and areas for the team to improve. Whether you call it a lesson learned or retrospective, I'd say it's a little blurry on the middle line there. What exercise have you done for psychological safety? A lot. And I would honestly Google psychological safety and you'll find tons and tons and tons of articles. But again, go back to, I want people to be able to express themselves without any fear of being judged. And when you ask someone, you know, tell us about your a time in your life when you were the most happy, you should probably feel safe to share a happy memory and not be worried someone else on the team is going to say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. People don't say that when other people are sharing their happiest memories. If they do, you have a bigger problem with psychological safety. But do things like that, give people a safe place where they can give an answer, they can speak up, let them use their mouth without risk of being judged or punished or ostracized, and you'll see safety go up. The more people get comfortable with talking and feeling like they're not going to be judged or treated harshly because of something they said. What if a team is high performing already and they don't think there's anything to improve? This is such a great question. It happened to me. I would recommend, if the team is doing Scrum, there is a really great checklist on the internet. Just Google Scrum checklist. And it literally says, these are the things a high performing Scrum team does. Print out that checklist in your next retro, give it to the team and say, team, I found this checklist. Since we're perfect, don't be condescending like that. Let's go through these and see if there's any areas that we could improve. I promise you, I've never had a team check more than 10 of the 50 boxes. So if there's 50 boxes and the best team I ever had only checked 10, that means there's 40 more boxes to improve and think about. So there's a lot of room to grow. If your team's not a Scrum team, you can find other kind of team checklists, because the reality is we often think, oh, we're good, but there's a lot more growth to do. And I'll throw this at you. If your team were to check all 50, or they were to say, actually, no, we really are perfect, then take it one level further and say, great, if you're really the perfect team, I want you to start teaching each other, and ask one of your team members every retro to start teaching the team an element that the team needs to learn about or wants to work on. By bringing them from the participant of a retro to the leading a retro side, I promise you that perspective change, they will start to see things. Hey, there's actually something we can work on over here. That'll change their mindset. I wouldn't do that with a young team, but if I've got a mature team that's been through a lot of retros and says, we've got it all down, I would say, then show me. You lead the retros and you teach each other things so that you're constantly getting better, and I'll be there to coach you. And what I found is shifting into that leader seat a lot of time changes their entire perspective, and your team starts finding a lot of things they can improve. So those are two ideas that you might use to try to improve a team that feels like they're already there. Any specific retrospective framework I'd recommend most effective? I do love Esther Derby and Diana Larson in Agile Retrospectives. This book, great book, Making Good Teams Great. She talks about the 5 phases of a retrospective. I almost always use that. If someone were to say to me today, I've got a team, I need you to lead a retrospective, I almost always use the 5 phases. The reason why is it's like coaching. It's an arc. It starts with kind of light, and then it expands your ideas, and then it compresses down and brings you to a point. It's just like the arc of a coaching conversation. So I find that's really good. There's a couple others out there, but I would say the primary one, and the one that's my go-to, is the 5 phases of a retrospective. You can Google it. Great articles out there. It's in this book. Really good stuff. Is it okay to be comfortable with silence during retro? If you notice a trend, one person breaking the silence, then you can start discussing people one-on-one, especially new Scrum Masters. You as a facilitator need to be comfortable with silence and even joke about it. Tell the team, hey team, I'm going to not say anything for 30 seconds. Let's see if I can. And like actually be comfortable allowing the team, because here's what's happening. When you're a facilitator and you call for a moment of silence, if I said, let's all be quiet for 5 seconds, You may be thinking about what I asked. Maybe I asked a question beforehand. Let's think about this, or I ask you, hey, does anybody have any feedback they want to give? They are thinking about, do I have anything I want to say? Do I really want to say that? Am I going to interrupt anybody else? Does it take me too much time to unmute? While they're thinking that, you're thinking, oh my gosh, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, it's no one's talking, and you're dying a little on the inside. Be comfortable with silence. It's okay to invest 30 seconds of silence. Listen to me now. 30 seconds of silence, or even a minute. That's an eternity on a Zoom call. If it means that someone speaks up who wouldn't have otherwise spoken up. If you do have one person who's always like dominating the conversation, maybe even ask them, hey, let's just all wait for a few seconds. And then let's just start on this side of the room and go around and see if anyone has anything to say, and have that loud person at this end, right? So there's ways you can facilitate to let people find their voice. The more people speak, the more you're going to get quality feedback. Do you want me to stop there or keep going through these? I know we're right at time.
You can keep going. We got until 8:30, so you're good to go.
Love it. All right, I'm just going to keep going through these. Great questions, by the way. Simon Sinek and Richard have great training in creating trusting teams. I love Simon Sinek, by the way. Great stuff. Good quote there. Question. The team generally wants to improve and they pick some big improvement items, but as you mentioned, there's not a lot of time to tackle the issues. They need a lot more time to further create a plan. How do you move forward? Okay, so someone had an idea, but it's a big idea. I could direct them. Yep, the team needs to own the experiment. They seem passive. How do you help them own it? Okay, if you're not familiar with the lean startup idea, you need to help them create an MVP, right? So you need to say, what a great idea. That's a huge idea. Let's find the smallest itty bitty increment that can prove if the assumptions built into this idea are valid or not. It's the same thing we do when we're building software. You don't want to build the entire software product. You want to find a minimum viable product. And what's minimum viable? It's enough to prove or disprove an assumption you have. So ask the team, we've got this improvement item. What are we assuming is true? We assume if we build this tool, someone will use it. We assume if we had that VP address the team, this would change. If we change that HR policy, it would change this. But how do we prove that? What's the smallest thing we can do that would prove whether or not that's a good idea? Lean it out, get an MVP, and then just like in Scrum, build in increments until you get to that larger improvement. It's the same way I'd have a team break down a large feature or an epic, break it down, start small, think big, start small, learn fast. That's how your team is gonna benefit on those big ideas. And like you said, perfectly, letting them own it. They can't own the big thing, but they can absolutely own if you can pare it down and make it a bit smaller. So look for creative ways to shrink it down. Is the retrospective the responsibility of the Scrum Master, or should the Scrum Master facilitate the retrospective meeting similar to the daily stand-up? Should we just make the retro a team thing? It depends on the maturity of the team. Where you want to be, just like with your daily stand-up, great question, by the way, where you want to be is the team completely owning the process and coming in and coming up with ideas and going forward. The reality is most teams are going to need help with not only facilitation, but also understanding the why and the value of a retrospective. That comes from time of training or activities or unpacking agile ways of thinking. I know maybe you did a Scrum training, a 2-day Scrum training, but you should be bringing in snippets, 10, 15-minute little snippets where you help them. Hey team, we're just going to real quickly talk about that idea about estimating, right? The Fibonacci sequence. Just a real quick refresher. I'm going to show you this slide. We're going to quickly look at it. Okay, now let's get into our retrospective. So depending on the maturity of the team, if they're immature, absolutely Scrum Master needs to be the master of ceremonies. Do not, though, go in and tell the team, let me tell you what to fix. But you facilitate and keep the scope where they're going to be able to find, fruit lying on the ground to pick up that's going to be good, right? So you guide them where they're going to find that low-hanging fruit. As the team matures, though, you'll be choking them if you keep doing that. So the more the team matures and the more they really get into it, you move to a facilitator role where you're coming up with the ideas, you're building the 5 phases, you're building the activities because you have time to do that. Theoretically, the team is working the rest of the sprint. you are also working, but you also should have some time to generate the activities so it doesn't get stale. Often when a scrum master gets too busy or they've got 5 or 6 other things they're doing or 5 or 6 teams, that's when you see a retrospective default to a rut. They just do the same thing over and over again because a scrum master, agile coach isn't free to build the next retrospective that's going to delight people. Okay. And so as the team matures, you can phase back until eventually you're kind of just coaching them as they have their retros, but that's when they're very mature. Start more involved, and then you feel it out. How much of me do they need to keep the value coming in these retrospectives, and then be as engaged as the team needs you to be. In a retro that people aren't talking as a scrum master is calling people to ask their view a nice idea. It completely depends on the safety of the room. If there's a manager in the room, and if people aren't talking because they're afraid to get fired, calling on someone is like pointing a gun at their face. That is not a comfortable situation to be in. If it's maybe stalled because people are thinking and, you know, they're really safe, but just, I don't know, they're just distracted today and they're not really, you know, there. I'd feel okay calling on them if I had that kind of safe relationship with them, but I wouldn't call on people if there was a chance that the reason they weren't speaking is because they were afraid. If fear is driving the silence, calling on them is actually going to be really harsh because imagine you're pushing them into that fear. What I would rather do if people aren't talking, and maybe it's because a manager's there and they're afraid, I would lead some silly icebreakers to make people feel like it's okay to talk and get them used to talking in that environment. And if there is a manager that you can't get rid of, right, they have to be there, then get them involved too. Hey guys, I'm going to do the first, you know, silly answer to this icebreaker, and then we'll have this manager do it. And so then by leading, if the manager's comfortable with that you can demonstrate safety, and then the team might calm down a little bit. Oh, if the manager's okay being silly, maybe I can be silly. Yeah, I think that, you know, a cat wearing a party hat in a YouTube video would be funny. Ha 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 ha. Right. You can lighten the mood that way and maybe make people feel more comfortable to talk. But just beware of calling on people when it's fear that's holding them back, because that could really make it worse and honestly make them very uncomfortable and perhaps even really clam up. So yes, you can call on people if you feel like they're safe. If you feel like there's maybe fear there, I would avoid calling on people. And instead, honestly, if I felt like a team was really afraid, I would spend more time humanizing the experience and saying, it's okay to talk. It's okay to have fun with some non-business things before turning our mind to business things that people could get fired over, right? Normally it's being fired that makes people really afraid. So start with things that won't get people fired, and then see if you can softly transition into things that may get people fired, but that they feel safer discussing, right? And hopefully no one gets fired because of retrospective, but just a heads up. Yeah, good checklist from 1 Minute Scrum. The book is good, +1 minute. You did die from a minute of silence. It takes practice in a Zoom meeting pausing. I'll tell you, as a speaker, it takes practice learning to pause and not fill the space with ums and ahs and It takes practice to just breathe. And that would be the key. If you're working on that, work on breathing, right? Take a 5 or 10 second breath cycle. All you have to do for a minute of silence is 6 10-second breath cycles. 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. Once you've done 6, boom, you're at a minute. Let's see. Eat an elephant 1 bite at a time, totally. And then some thank yous. I think that's all the questions. Great questions, everyone. Really good. Thank you.